Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to be going over my top 5 tips I think every single Akshan needs to know. Now, my goal behind this video is to make you a better League of Legends player, as well as to give you a better understanding of the champion as a whole. I'm going to put timestamps at every single point of the video. They're going to be at the top of the page if you want to skip around. And if you want to contact me directly, I am going to put a pinned comment down below with a link to my Discord where you can send me any questions. I'd be really happy to help you out. And finally, I'm a little bit limited with this format, only doing 5 tips because I don't want my videos to run too long. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, your own tips. I'm always open to critique and feedback, so please leave those comments down below. And with all that out of the way, let's get right into the video. Alright, in getting into tip number 1, we're going to be covering his heroic swing that is probably going to have the most skill expression on this champion. Now, you can be using it in one of 2 ways. You can be using it in an offensive manner, where you are looking to put your character model in between the enemy character model and the retreat path that they are looking to have. In general, enemies will look to retreat back to the closest tower. So for example, how we would look to heroic swing in here would be to set an E up and then get in between them and the target they are going. You do not want to be doing a very short swing where you get stopped, because you are going to be able to get more autos if you end up here on your heroic swing as opposed to ending here. So just making sure that you do pretty much like a rainbow around the enemy and getting right in the way of their path and giving you the most amount of chase. And if they decide to change their routes, say when you do this really nice swing in between you and their tower, they might look to go like this. You can use your W to track them down with the increased movement speed that increases with level, and your W that goes from 80 to 120. Now, it's going to be a little bit more difficult with the defensive maneuvers that you're going to be looking to utilize when you are playing him and using your heroic swing, because it requires a little bit more thought. When you are doing this, you always have a lot of choices of different terrain you can use, and there are going to be very strong choices and very, very poor choices. An example of a poor choice, if you're trying to get away from this enemy, would be throwing an E out and going like this, because this is going to be the minimal amount of space that you are going to be able to create. Now, if you, however, are taking a little bit of a longer arc, you're throwing it at a wall that's pretty far away, you are able to get a nice amount of distance covered. And the better you get at it, the more understanding you have of his terrain hitboxes, the more distance you can start covering, until you just really find these really weird sweet spots where you can just get a massive swing like that and just completely cover an entire screen with this ability. So get into the practice tools, practice the heroic swings, because this is going to be the most important thing. Similar to being able to land a good blitzcrank Q, this is just an integral part of your kit. And that will wrap up tip number 1. Alright, and getting into tip number 2, I want to talk about the 2 very distinct playstyles that you can look to utilize to start climbing with this champion. First of all, there is always the option of just being a very, very strong laner and accruing a lot of CS on this champion and just scaling. Because of his build, it allows him to scale really, really heavily, and he starts doing massive amounts of damage the more items you get, because that's how crit multiplier champions work. So you can either be this type of player where you're looking to be extremely lane dominant. I would recommend using the blue ward, so you can look to utilize hitting enemy champions with your ultimate from very, very far distance away. If you ever just press the R button, you can see the range on it, and the blue is going to be the best there. However, a very good and strong playstyle, particularly in solo queue, is going to be the roaming playstyle, and you want to utilize the full effect of the roaming playstyle. You want to get control wards as well as oracle lenses and look to roam after pushing the minion wave into the enemy's tower and feigning a back, and then looking for very, very strong roaming situations. If you did not know, the W can be pretty much indefinite as long as you're staying near walls, and it allows you to cover more distance with the increased movement speed and your added mobility of your E, as well as the very, very nice slow coming out of your Q, allows you to be a very strong roaming champion. And it doesn't really matter the lane that you are in, he just has the perfect kit for it. He has a slow, he has a dash, he has an execute, and he has a stealth. So make sure that you are utilizing his very strong roaming kit when you are playing this champion. And that will wrap up tip number 2. All right, and getting into tip number 3, we're going to talk about his just very, very strong playstyle, and that is how he can just become a very good guerrilla fighter, where he can take really quick trades and then escape and get out and really just deny a lot of the return damage. If you did not know, the passive provides a very nice shield. Go and press the attack gives you a nice little burst, and the E and Q just give you that really nice damage burst window that you can look to utilize on the enemies, and then using your shields to back up, as well as the slow on the enemy Q, and taking that very quick trade is going to be very hard for enemies to respond, particularly if they're using their abilities on the minions. Taking advantage of those power differential windows and taking all ins after an enemy champion is usually utilizing a key skill. For example, a Syndra using a QE or a QW on the wave just really provides you a in where you're able to proc press the attack. You're able to get your passive proc off. If they have any kind of return damage, or shield will most likely absorb most of it, and you can just get a huge amount of burst on the enemy champions. You have a decent amount of consistent damage, so look to utilize those power differential windows, and you will start seeing success when you are taking trades with the enemy champions. And that will wrap up this tip. All right, and getting into tip number 4, we're going to talk about another kind of playstyle that you can look to utilize when you are playing in the team fights, and that is, he is a relatively short range champion with his auto attacks. He's not a Caitlyn that can just really sit back and do a lot of damage from afar. So how you look to make up for this rather shorter range is you need to be using your heroic swing in a very, very effective way. You need to identify the biggest threats to you. Say they have a very fed fizz. When he looks to all in combo on you, this is when you need to be using this heroic swing ability. Or if you are just steamrolling enemies in fights and you just need to chase them down, using your heroic swing in a way that allows you to further the chase down is going to be important. So just be very careful, because he can be punished quite easily due to how squishy he is, as well as his low range. You have to think of it a little bit like Vayne, how she has to be slippery in team fights or she just gets absolutely blown up. Now also, the W is a very effective tool because it is not like a Evelyn stealth that once you take damage you get out of a stealth. So having this W up is very, very nice, because it's going to increase the movement speed you have when you are near the walls, and it is regenerating a bit of mana. So this is very, very an effective tool as well to get out of some sticky situations, particularly if there's a lot of long range poke and you want to get in without taking huge chunks. This is going to be an effective way, as well as waiting for enemy key cooldowns to be used. Say a Fizz ultimate, a Zed ultimate, a Thresh hook, a Blitzcrank hook, things that have high impact, that have a particular high threat to you. Waiting till those are being used in your skirmishes are going to be very important, particularly if you're one of those players that feel like you are better than the average player in your elo. Essentially, you need to use your allies as the resource of meat bags that just are there to absorb for you while you carry the game, because you are the only known quantity in that game, because you know that you can perform to a certain level. You do not want to be relying on your allies to do everything for you. And that will wrap up this tip. All right, and getting into the final tip on this, similar to the previous tip where we are looking to utilize our allies as meat bags, essentially this is the perfect champion to utilize your team as that kind of resource, because of the passive giving you a revive on enemy targets on top of your ability to execute. He is a just premier clean up champion. You do not want to be the first person engaged in the team fights because of your ability to clean up with executes and revive allies. You do not want to be taking too many risks early in team fights. You want to make sure that you are staying in the back, using your slows on enemy divers, using your heroic swing in a way that is going to allow you to live longer into the team fights. This is just going to be great because the enemies will be using high impact cooldowns, most likely earlier in the fight, really allowing you to have enough damage to finish them off and to not just get absolutely blown up extremely quickly. So keep in mind that he is just a premier garbage man that comes and picks up all the scraps of a team fight and can really set up some Baron plays where no other champion would allow that, because you can res your allies and then the enemy team has some longer timers and you're just able to get a bunch of people over to the Baron with your reses after long gritty team fights with this champion. This is going to be a great way to carry the late games. These just provide massive swings when the longer the game goes on, because you're, first of all, you're scaling extremely well with your crit multipliers, as well as the death timers going up more and more and more. So the more valuable your passive is going to go up at the start. It's more important probably just getting that 100 gold when the death timers are at like 15 to 20 seconds, but later when it gets to 40 to 60 seconds, the revive is just infinitely more more useful. So keep this in mind when you're playing this champion, and you will do well. If you have any comments, critiques, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. That will wrap up my video. If you guys have any of your own tips that you've developed while playing this champion, I'd love to hear them. As always, guys, take it easy.